Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Today I got to sit down with Logan Skees. Logan is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a United States Marine Corps infantry veteran who served during operating Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2014. Dedicated to service, Logan's patriotic spirit lives on through contribution to his country, local community, and brotherhood of military veterans. His dynamic leadership skills have helped shape several startup ventures around the core Trainerspace brand, to include a 501c3 nonprofit organization, the Trainerspace Foundation, a remote fitness coaching platform, CyberFit, and a military-centered media channel, Veteran 2.0. I met Logan a few months back, just grabbing a cup of coffee. We had some similar interests. We sat down, we hit it off, and then from there we hit a few workouts together, and we said, hey, man, I think we have similar views, and I invited him onto the podcast today. He's an amazing individual, and he's got so much potential, and I see the world in front of him. Guys, please enjoy today's podcast, and if you do, subscribe, rate, and review. Enjoy Logan Skees. And we are live here at Trainerspace. I'm with my man Logan here.
What's going on?
Logan, what's happening, man?
Loving life.
Life.
Having a good time.
This is a pretty extraordinary facility you have here. Tell me a little bit about how long this has been here, how long you've been a part of this.
Sure. Trainerspace is a dream come to life for so many people. It's the product of years of teamwork. A great group came together about 3 years ago to design a concept of a gym facility that immerses the clients and the trainers in our core philosophy of inspired movement. And that's really what we've developed and have had some success with here in the local market.
So, I mean, you sound very dedicated to the craft. What is your background in training, and what's your background in general? Like, what's kind of your story?
So I guess my story could really start where I stepped foot on the yellow footprints at Parris Island in South Carolina. I was 18, I just graduated high school, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I grew up in an amazing family environment, big family of 6. Had the privilege of living all over the world. My father's a designer, actually, so I was always into graphic design and motion media and things like that. But you know, I was about to turn 18, and I realized college wasn't going to be the path for me at that time. So I've had this just kind of calling, this burning, this itch at the back of my mind almost, that was always asking myself if I could do it. You know, if you could make it through Marine boot camp, infantry school, combat deployments. I just always had that question, and that was really, that single question defined the trajectory of most of my life.
Does your family have a background in the military?
Both of my grandfathers served in the Navy during Vietnam. My uncle served in the Army during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So we do have a heritage of service in my family, for sure.
So you were kind of carrying on the lineage, so to speak. What did your parents think when you were like, hey, man, I'm going to Parris Island. I want to try and do this. I'm not taking the conventional path. What was the response?
They've always been very supportive of me. Even in times when I act against my own self-interest. You know, God bless my mother. She's a incredible and patient human being. You know, switching up from getting a degree in graphic design to being a machine gunner in the infantry is a big jump. But she was supportive from day one, man. She really was. I laid it out clearly. I remember to this day, I said, I feel like I need to do something very hard in my life to answer that question. I want to do this because it seems like the hardest challenge available. A lot of folks in the military space and the defense space will obviously claim that special operations communities have a much higher challenge than Marine infantry, and I won't argue that whatsoever. But for where I was at in that point in my life, Marine infantry was the pinnacle of challenge that I was prepared to kind of engage with, and she took it well, my father took it well, and there was no stopping me at that point in time. And I was really under the mindset of, I will get my EGA, the cherished Eagle Globe and Anchor. I will make it to a unit, and I will make it overseas to deployment, or die trying. And so I just pushed my way through, and less than a year and a half later, I was boots on the ground in Marja in southern Helmand province.
So you were a shade over 19 years old halfway around the globe in a place you had never been before
With a machine gun.
with a machine gun. Sounds pretty cool.
I got to be honest, man. We have a lot of fun in the Marine Corps. It's a lot of work, you know, and it's some moments that are scary for sure, but you connect with some of the best friends you can imagine. I mean, these people are our family. You know, they're your brothers, and you know, anyone that's seen any Hollywood rendition of military service ever knows that camaraderie is a main component of a main benefit to service. But you know, I enjoyed a lot of the time because even though it was miserable and a lot of it was facing the elements, you were doing it with your best friends. So it kind of helped smooth out the challenges.
Do you find that having those like-minded individuals, I use the term tribe sometimes, makes it almost like that as your motivating factor, being amongst those individuals, being like, hey, this is now my new normal? Whereas most people, I mean, especially in America, are like, you know what, I'm doing this on my own.
I hear you. Being with like-minded people is a huge benefit. It's most likely the number one factor to success. You know, on the commercial side of the house, you hear thought leaders like Warren Buffett saying things like, you know, your net worth is your network. You know, and one is the same. You know, in the military, a cohesive team is paramount for mission success. You hear it in the startup industry, the startup space. You hear about collaboration and co-creation and all these things. It's really in every dimension, in every playing field. The one common denominator for successful outcomes is the ability to connect and engage with and really brain couple with other people and tune in your brain waves to have a common shared resonance and execute simultaneously as an organism as opposed to a fragmented whole.
So, kind of wrapping my head around the fact that you're 19, you got a machine gun, you're now doing patrols halfway around the world. What's your day-to-day like when you're over there?
Well, I think it's important to really, for me at least, I see it as important to submit a few lines of sentiment to what happens before that, just out of almost a respect to the instructors and a respect to the leaders and the total force behind what it takes to get a 19-year-old machine gunner boots on the ground and helmet. You know, that's where the movie starts a lot of the time. That's where the story starts. It's a hot, blistering day in the desert, and you see a badass guy in full kit with a team doing some high-speed things. But for me, just in the journey that I witnessed, you know, there's so much. The military-industrial complex is so much larger. It's like the glacier underneath of that dude on the ground, the tactical operator on the forward line, so to speak. So with that spirit in mind, I would say that the day-to-day for a long time is nonstop physical and mental work, nonstop. And you know, you kind of sedate that with the occasional weekend of drunken exploits. So we trained our asses off at School of Infantry. Immediately from there, you basically have a small weekend off, and kind of almost like a summer camp scenario for big kids with camouflage and weapons training. They'll send you straight to a battalion, a unit, where you basically are like the young pups being checked in for full-time babysitting and work. And you'll do everything from pick up cigarette butts in the grass to mopping the bathrooms to cleaning weapons and studying manuals. And you do that for weeks and months straight, intermediately with field ops where you hike with heavy packs and you practice the deployment for a whole deployment basically in the United States. And then when you're ready, upon all of your training objectives being met, they send the battalion downrange to do the whole thing for real. So there's a huge component, like the good folks at 29 Palms, there's mock Afghan villages in the desert out there. it's kind of like the final graduating test for a lot of infantry battalions will
That was what
deploy
I was
out
going to
there.
ask. How do you actually replicate that type of environment back here?
Well, it kind of scales up with the budget. You know, at the most budget friendly is you're standing outside the barracks with your team and you're holding broomsticks and you're yelling bang bang and you're practicing rifle tactics, maneuvering in the grass quad. You know, the grass flat in front of your barracks, and you kind of play those games for weeks and months to practice for going to a range on base. You know, kind of like elevating from pre-K to middle school, and you shoot live ammo and you maneuver with your team, and little by little you start doing more aggressive trainings, like going out into the woods for a couple of weeks, and not just any woods, obviously military base woods with mock villages built out inside of it, and you train for that. I think we did probably 7 or 8 months of workup of pre-deployment training, and then we go, once you're kind of, you have all the regimental standards checked, they send you to a place in the desert in California where they have entire miniature cities that are designed almost like Disney World in a way to look like Afghanistan or Iraq villages. And then they populate those with actors, like security clearance paid actors to come in that are dressed in local garb. And they'll hide fake IEDs in there. They'll have AKs with blanks. So you actually will have full-blown operations where you're looking for specific people in the crowd, where you're having to search for IEDs that are hidden using real-time methods that ISIS is using overseas, or the Taliban are using overseas. So you know, that was kind of like the final test. So that period of time is significant to get a 19-year-old on the ground.
There's probably really no way of knowing you're ready until you're there, but as you transition from your training into, you know, boots on the ground, how did you feel? Did you feel like, hey, I've been training for this, I'm ready? Or did you have that little bit of doubt in your mind still?
I think you always have that doubt in your mind. You know, you always have that question. And I think that question is a good thing. You know, it kind of, for me, it's along the same lines as, if someone tells you they're not afraid, they're either lying, or, you know, you should actually be afraid of that person more than anything else, because that's just not a natural human emotion. In the same way, you always have that certain, the feeling of uncertainty. You know, you can be as well trained and well prepared, but like the great boxer, was it Ali, says everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah,
Maybe that
it
was Tyson.
Yep, Tyson.
It's totally different when you get over there, as to be expected. You know, it's a government, a military-built village in Northern California can never replicate a real village in Southern Helmand Province. You know, with real people there. You know, the majority, the hearts and minds operations that we were conducting isn't like conventional warfare. Kind of like we were discussing in our workout. It's not like World War II, where you're, or World War I, or where you're, it's conventional and it's a clash of uniformed forces from clean lines, almost like the Civil War. It's not like that. It's insurgents within, hidden within the civilian population, which means the ground forces have to, at one moment, be handing out water bottles and blankets, and then the very next moment be taking contact, and then the very next moment after that be in a key leader engagement, drinking chai tea with the village elders. And that's all warfare.
Now, how do you train for that? So obviously it's one of the most challenging. I mean, just imagine being at a 9-to-5 job, and then all of a sudden you're in a massive car wreck, and then 5 minutes later you have to talk to school children. That's like the only equivalent I could think of in a normal person's life that would even come close to what that looks like. How do you train for that specifically?
Sure. Getting into a car accident, talking to school children, getting into a street fight, right? It's kind of,
That's I mean, that's like the U.S. equivalent, right?
It is.
I mean, that's the closest that anybody here is gonna get to what that is on a regular basis, I imagine, right? Is that just something that you know, you don't learn until you do, and from there you kind of my brother says this: you aim, shoot, or you load, shoot, and then aim. You know what I mean? Like you get in there, and then
Yeah.
you got to figure it out from there a little bit.
Totally. The OODA loop is something we should unpack a little bit. But answering your question, it's so much different when you get there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like anything. If you're going to move to Denver, you see all the pages on Denver, you look at all the articles, and you see videos, you maybe even visit, but you move out there, and it's totally different than you expected. Real life is always different than the plan, whether it's counterinsurgency warfare or a domestic move within the states. I mean, life is always different than what you imagine it to be. I love the saying, though, that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. So even though the training is fabricated in a large way, it's the best training on earth. The Marine Corps Infantry has the best training of any armed forces group aside from special operations on earth. We are the shock troops of the country. A lot of folks don't realize this, but the Marine Corps is considered the 911 reaction force. They have a direct line of communication to the president, and they're the only armed services group that can be mobilized without an act of Congress. So the Marine Corps can effectively invade and do some serious damage and execute on targets at any country on the planet within 3 days. We are a Marine Air Ground Task Force unit, so we can do amphibious assault, air assault, land assault. We can do anything, and we're basically the shock troops and peacekeepers for the world. So I think we have to maintain that super high standard of training. So when that 19-year-old kid gets on the ground and it is different than what we expected, and you forget everything that you were thinking about, and you just have to execute, it's that mind-muscle memory. That muscle memory, in a way, you fall back on your training, and they really scorch the neurophysiology with pattern. You do things thousands, tens of thousands of times prior to going. So with respect to hearts and minds operations, it is, in my humble opinion, it has an additional layer of complexity from conventional warfare. Taking nothing away from conventional warfare, obviously I've only been a student of that. But counterinsurgency and irregular warfare tactics require a certain degree of psychological understanding, because you need to genuinely engage with the community. You have to genuinely engage with the village members in your local area, because they have to root out the enemy combatants. They have to turn in what a lot of times ends up being their cousin, their uncle, who's radicalized. And we have to force them to push their own people out. So that's as an invading force whose ideology is diametrically opposed to theirs, that's a very heavy challenge.
That has to be, because you can imagine, I mean, I know myself enough to, let's say, turn my brother, turn my cousin, and have a person who I've never seen before tell me I need to do that in order for me to be safe.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of leads me to another question of how did you feel that your training prepared you? Did you fall back onto those things? Were there moments of like, oh shit, there has to be, right? I mean, I train nonstop on regular stuff, like, doing a podcast, and then all of a sudden I go, oh shit, I forgot the batteries. So are there moments like that?
There is. I had awesome squad leaders, team leaders. We had great leaders that did everything they could to prepare us. So I always had, generally speaking, I had a sense of security and knowledge, knowing that, look, no matter what happens, we're an adaptable unit. And, short of something breaking the laws of physics, sort of like black magic occurring that is completely undescribable, we're pretty much good to go. Like, anything that happens is going to be within the realm of what we're prepared for, because we're prepared for a whole host of contingencies to take place. And what matters is that I've got a Marine to my left and my right. We're best friends. We've been operating together for months, if not years by this point, and we're ready. Adaptability is really the key fundamental skill set. It's not necessarily preparing for any specific thing to happen. It's just being prepared for a range of contingencies. So in a way, my answer is like yes to both. Every day something new happened that we weren't prepared for, but every day our adaptable mindset kind of took lead through those moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So taking these skills and training. I mean, I look at someone like that, whether they're doing in the military, whether it's sport, whether it was, you know, learning an instrument. I think there's something immense to be learned from these individuals. How have you taken the things that you've learned? Obviously, experiences are a huge part of it, but also the training that you've had, and now kind of bridge the gap between, okay, my military service versus civilian life now.
Sure. The bridge from military service to where I'm at in the fitness industry now as a civilian took place before I left Camp Lejeune, where I was stationed. There was a fitness coordinator's course. It's basically a personal trainer for Marines kind of school that they were offering. It was like a week-long training, intensive, and I loved lifting. I love training. I always have. So I got involved in that, and it opened my eyes to the field of exercise science, realizing that there's a working harder and working smarter in the gym. That was my first kind of working smarter in the gym learning. I decided to take my honorable discharge, ETS, separate from the Marine Corps when my contract was complete. Got certified as a coach and did my time at the big box gyms. You know, those full packed 5, 6, 8 hour client days for a long time. And over the course of several years, I got connected with the Trainerspace group. It's an investor-backed gym startup, really a fitness brand. I was fortunate enough to get in on the ground floor as a, really a sweat equity partner and just show up to the construction site and help get the gym built. And once it was built, we kind of looked around at the small team that was there and said, well, let's run this thing. Over time, we ran it, we grew it, we developed the roots, we developed the core messaging and the internal processes. And what we have now is a gym that has been in Boca Raton for over close to 3 years now, after a year of build-out. And it's a veteran-owned and operated facility. The visionary behind the project, Kerry Reitbach, is Army veteran. And together we're focused on easing the transition process for other vets. You know, my transition process was riddled with challenges and obstacles and some very hard times. I think a lot of guys are faced with that. As we discussed prior, an existential crisis kind of takes place when you take off the uniform. So what we have here at the gym is a way to provide no-cost certifications, holistic healing modalities for detox, and then employment for veterans. And that's kind of the system that we've constructed and we've started here.
And I'm glad you brought that up in terms of the transition for those who are coming back home. What is your current perception of what happens, obviously going through it, in terms of being discharged from the military? Do you think it's adequate? Do you think that there's room for improvement? What's your perspective?
First, I'll say that I think there is a lot of good, hardworking people in the separations department of the military and in the receiving sort of space of the VA. I think there's a ton of people that they spend their entire life's work doing everything they can to help prepare veterans or to help prepare service members for the jump, and then a lot of folks on the other side that'll do everything they can to help catch them in a way when they do separate. And there's a lot of funding behind that too. We're talking tens and hundreds of millions of dollars annually into solving the problem of transition. So I think there's a lot of great work being done there. Like anything, especially related to the government, there's areas for growth. There's definitely an opportunity to innovate. The system tends to lean towards the bureaucratic kind of persuasion, and it slows the growth. I believe that there's a lot of leadership internal to the VA, internal to the main body of the military. A lot of commanders and a lot of unit leaders are waking up to the longevity and holistic healing They're having more of an integrated approach when they look at troops and when they look at veterans, as opposed to let's mask that symptom with a pill, or let's just burn and churn these guys out and bring in fresh recruits when these guys are busted up. They invest more in the human body and human mind from day one till separation. So in essence, speaking kindly of my counterparts in those units and those kind of agencies, I would say that the biggest opportunity for growth isn't the VA, and it's not even in the DoD, it's in the commercial sector. After World War II, that generation was called the greatest generation, not because they built out veteran services, not because they reinvented the military, for instance, it's because they reinvented industry. All those warfighters came back and they applied operational level work ethic, tactical efficiency, and strategic level overview planning to the private sector, and they led their communities. So the biggest opportunity for growth in the veteran transition space is in the private sector by way of commerce generating activities in a business. And certainly there's a charity component to that, of course, a social impact component, but I think veteran entrepreneurship and veteran-owned and operated business initiatives are really this solution at the end of the day for everything that we're discussing.
Yeah, I could attest to that. Obviously, the operation being run here. Who's the gentleman down at the front desk there?
David Kirkland.
David, I mean, you told him, like, hey, I'm going to be up here. He's like, Roger, got you. I'm like, that's a really good operation. Like, imagine having just like a 16-year-old who's never done anything before, knows nothing about, like, hard work or respect, and they're just like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, lets everybody upstairs while we're, having a quiet podcast or something like that.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about those who are trained, number one, but also have an idea of a team.
Totally.
And I think that is something that lots of places nowadays wonder why they're not successful, because they don't have that team aspect of creating the team first and then surrounding the business around that. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Is that one of the core philosophies here at Trainerspace, would you say?
Teamwork has always been paramount to everything we built. It comes down to we really want to leverage the understandings we gained in the military as leaders and after the fact, of course, but we really wanted to integrate true leadership into this company. It's easier said on a podcast than done in real life over the course of years, no doubt, but we've got great team members who are prior service. We've got great team members who are patriots, and they support what we do with the defense community, and having that common understanding and that common goal really helps us be more efficient and effective, for sure.
Yeah. Logistically, what are the things that you kind of call back on in terms of your training, in terms of your experiences, that allow you to run a facility like this, and also start to bridge the gap in terms of the, you said, charitable efforts that you are looking to do? What are some of the things you fall back on in terms of the things that you've done, trained, experienced, that allow you to do that?
The best way I could say to simplify that answer is in the same way we were kind of discussing adaptability earlier, and how that's kind of like an operating system. It's like a mental operating system as opposed to a specific action. It's not a specific movement or a specific task that I took out of the military, like cleaning a machine gun.
Yeah, you're not turning.
I'm not.
That doesn't transition to clean equipment or something like that.
Exactly, but adaptability does.
Yeah.
Clear communication does. Common courtesy.
Adaptability, communication.
Common courtesy for your fellow man, but also having the ability to confront other people. That's huge in today's tech driven culture. So many people's awareness is fragmented and sort of consumed in devices that when you actually engage with them in person, either they have trouble fully articulating themselves or they have trouble being confronted. So that emotional resilience is a big one. So it's kind of like the operating systems that we brought out is most effective as opposed to any particular skill set.
So yeah, that kind of resonates with me when you talk about confrontation with people, and that's one of the hardest things that most people have a time with, just because I think that there's a huge identification, and if someone is like saying that I'm not doing the right thing, then that hurts me.
Sure.
What strategies do you guys use in your training, and jumping the gap to now that allow you to do that?
Sure. What you're talking about is super important, and it kind of ties into everything we're discussing, which is identity. A lot of folks, in terms of self-awareness, personally identify with their behavior. That's to say, or they personally identify with the things that they see, the things that they have. They may even personally identify with their own thoughts. For example, so they'll identify with their mind, their feelings. They're very people can tend to be reactive. So, being confronted, like you say, can really upset a lot of folks.
It upsets me. Don't confront me about anything. I don't care if I parked in your parking spot, if I left the toilet seat up. Do not confront me about anything. I just don't like it. You know what I mean? But it's interesting that the times that I get confronted about things, like it takes about 30 seconds for you to realize, like, this person doesn't want to hurt me. In a lot of ways, obviously, they're trying their best to convey the message in a way that they're getting their perspective across, yet they're also trying to preserve my, feelings, let's say, in the best way possible. And I think people are in a lot of ways ill-equipped to do confrontation.
It's very true. It's true. Very ill-equipped because there's not much practice. You don't rise to the occasion.
Especially nowadays, right?
Especially nowadays, man. There's just not much practice. We're very mired in political correctness, and that's just a part of life. I have nothing negative to say about being politically correct, being tolerant. I really support all of that. One of my favorite leaders, Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, he talks about in his book, which I highly recommend, is that great leaders adapt to the environmental constraints they're placed within. And in today's society, we're in a very PC world where people don't like to be confronted. So I've come to find, as an adaptable leader and one that has been placed into scenarios where there are some, of the stereotypical millennials who want to, they want their task order diced down into a bite-sized sample. They want you to invent the entire company, identify all the roles and responsibilities, clearly delineate that in a contract, get legal and finance and everybody on board to bottle it up in such a beautiful package, and then present them with a task as well as benefits and pay, and say, could you please go ahead and do this job like we signed in the contract? And then pat them on the back and say, thanks for being here. I'm happy you're here. You got to send those belonging cues. You got to really ensure that you connect with the core of the person and let them know that you care, and that they're an authentic member of the team.
And that you're also looking out for what's best for them, even though they might not agree with it, or they may not be able to see it just yet, right? So, I have confrontations with some of the individuals that I have that I work with, and it's not easy. I think the first step for me, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, is when something does come up, I check in with myself and I go, what is the response for me? Like, how do I feel when this person does this, or when this person's late, or whatever? How do I feel about that? And how do and am I reacting based upon that?
Sure.
Versus, okay, I feel that way. I can articulate, like, hey, I feel disrespected when you're late. In what way? Let me get your perspective on this, number one, which is I don't do that very often. I'm like, you're late, then this is something I always go back to. All you know is how you feel and what they did. So I know what I feel like. I know what you did. So my biggest thing is, like, what happened? I want to know your side of it. In your perspective, like, how do you go about those situations?
That's a tough question. That's a tough question.
We ask hard-hitting questions here on the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast, okay?
I can say that I'm a student of life and leadership, and I've got a lot of great mentors, and I've got a long way to grow in my life as a leader and a manager and a business owner. So that's my disclaimer. People listening to this are gonna be like, "Hey, Logan." So I've had my fair share of moments where, I definitely didn't perform in a way that Simon Sinek or a guru would have been proud of. Because sometimes that feeling of someone coming in late, and you're like, you can feel the solar flares going off inside of you of rage. It's difficult to manage your emotions and really take yourself out of the equation. So what I do know is theory and a few minor successful moments in my own walk, which is hire people who genuinely are on the same page as you, at least a similar page.
That's a really good place to start. I've heard like a few people say, be careful of people who can't take a no. Especially if they're close knit on your team. If it's your cleaning person, and they're like, they can't take a no. All right, we can get another one.
Sure.
But if it's your accountant who can't take a no, that's a very, very high level position and close to you that you can't trust.
Trust and loyalty are key factors to the equation. When we're saying things like, how really interacting with a team, my humble opinion is you need to hire people that you genuinely see the world on a similar bandwidth on, so you have that cohesiveness. You can disagree. For example, Carrie and him and I have multiple disagreements every day. Sometimes I feel like we're about to get into a bare knuckle boxing match, but we will, no matter how many hours it takes, we'll set ourselves down and stare each other down and just talk it out until until we out reason the other person, until the truth is found. So just because you hire similar people doesn't mean that you need a bunch of yes men around you. You need people who are going to play the devil's advocate, or who are going to give the benefit of the doubt, and who are going to say, dude, I totally feel what you're feeling right now, but what if this is what if you're wrong and this is the truth? So you need operators around you, and that's been my mentality from day one.
And I think that's something that I focus too much on is, are these people around me the same as me? I think obviously the way you conveyed it and the way you portrayed it was, well, are these people enough like-minded that when there is something to be said or something to be discussed, you can sit down with them, and that is the important part. And I think that actually goes to relationships in general, whether they're work relationships or personal relationships. Are the people you're surrounding yourself with those who are mature, self-aware enough to go, hey, this is how you're acting, but how am I acting in this situation?
That's right.
That might be instigating this scenario.
You're really unboxing a lot of the keys to operational success, which is you need a team that's self-aware enough and has an identity that's not placed on their own feelings, and that's difficult to hire for. So we use best guess. Identity. This is kind of segueing back into the transition of veterans and how much they struggle because they lose their identity. So I think a lot of vets that are coming through the OEF and OIF, Iraq and Afghan war era, they almost have a resilient identity set. And what I've learned through my own personal experience going through that process is, the only identity that one should really have is the internal identity. That's the thing way behind the thoughts, way behind the feelings. It's the thing that if you lay in a float tank for several hours and your mind stops chattering, your body stops moving, and that deep point of observation, when you connect with that identity, then life kind of becomes more coherent in a way. So hiring for folks that have a core identity gained through self-awareness and a motivation towards a cause larger than themselves, larger than their own ego. That's how you have a team where you can execute like monsters and get things done and take action and be disciplined. And if someone's slacking on the team, you can sit down and say, dude, come on. Don't forget about what we're trying to accomplish here. You're a vital component here. This is like the Spartans at Thermopylae. You know, we have overlapping shields. Your shield is missing in the fight. That's exposing our lateral flanks. You're an important asset to this team. What's going on? You know, that's the key.
And I think when you approach it like that, saying, hey, this is your expectation, we are counting on you.
Totally.
It is coming from a much different perspective of you're not doing this, and you're not actually considering the fact that like, yo, you're important.
You couldn't be more right, man. And it's such a small difference. In the same way they did all those studies with school children, the one group of teachers would praise the children for their hard work, and one group of teachers would praise the children for being smart. And over the course of time, the children that were reinforced by, wow, you're such a hard worker. You must have worked really hard to do that test. Even if they failed or they passed, no matter what their scores were, they were praised for the action they took as opposed to the inherent gifts they had. It helped place the kid's identity in the right things. Same thing and with a team in this scenario, instead of being accusatory and pointing at the behavior itself, the symptom, that's really what behavior is. It's a symptom of what's going on inside. Instead of saying, you did this, you're holding us back. And really forcing that individual to place their identity on that outward thing, you connect with them and say, what's going on, dude? Like, the behavior is what brought us to here, but what's happening inside? Are you good, bro?
Yeah, I think that's something that's fairly overlooked for most individuals and brings up a large level of discomfort and vulnerability in people.
Totally.
Is, I see that you did that. That's almost like an acting out. Like, what's really going on that's making this happen? And I think that's a much higher level of awareness to understand that people aren't their actions. People are most likely driven by their feelings and a irrationality about what they actually feel versus what they've been trained to react as. There's actually a Jonathan Haidt, spelled H-A-D-T, has written a couple books. One being, he's a social scientist in regards to the reasons why we do what we do and think the way we think, side with the sides that we do. And he has a general concept of an elephant and a rider. And the rider is our ability to kind of like see things and move about the environment. But the elephant is our emotion. It's that deep-seated feeling inside of you. And if the elephant wants to go, it's going to go.
Yeah.
Right?
It's true.
It's a matter of the rider recognizing what these circumstances are that they know is going to drive the elephant in that direction. And, okay, how do we curtail this thing? It's not going to stop it, but how do we, bend the river to where we want it to go in order for us to get in the direction that we want to be going? In terms of where you're at now in regards to your team, your career, how do you balance where people want to go versus where you want to go and where we think we all need to go? Is that something that you do on a regular basis? Is that something that you have conversations with? Is it all the above?
In order to answer that question, I would just have to really, answer it in chunks.
Yeah. A lot to unpack there.
For sure, man. With the gym business here at Trainerspace, we are so fiercely dedicated to serving the community. We love connecting with like-minded clients who value in a fully immersive gym space, that want to move with a coach that connects with you on a personal level, but also has the technical skill sets of exercise science to guide you towards success. So that operation is so vitally important, and we have an amazing management team and an amazing executive team in place that keep Trainerspace moving forward in the best possible direction. Some of the best years of my life was in the founding of an early stage development thereafter of the gym brand. Now I'm in the gym almost every single day. I love this space. It's in my DNA. But my day-to-day operations and top-line oversight are on our adjacent projects. So what that means is, your question was how do you keep people aligned towards the same goal?
And obviously individuals have an idea of where they want to go.
Sure.
And you have an idea of where you think they should be going.
Sure.
And you have an idea of where you want to go. How do you forge all those rivers?
This is my best guess. My best guess is that you share your passion and your purpose relentlessly. And you're very transparent, and you're as authentic as you can be. You try to practice all those great, those new age words. You're present when you share. You share from a deep space of vulnerability, and you just let people know what you care about and why you're doing it. And in my opinion, it's not like in the Marine Corps where you're dictating to a squad that's like, hey dudes, we're doing this, that, and the other thing, and that's what's happening. In the civilian sector, it's so much more collaborative. I like the gravitational style of leadership because I'll share what I think needs to happen, and I'll share why it needs to happen. And the people who are drawn to that already, who it's already in their path, I don't have to forge their will. Yep. I just have to join it with mine as a force multiplier. So I just seek to share the message and let people who that resonates with come to the top, and they join almost organically. And everyone else who it doesn't resonate so well with, they continue operating in the space that they're already in.
Yeah, and even potentially it gives those other people an opportunity to say, hey, wait a second, they're all doing this. Maybe I'm the asshole. You know what I mean? And it's much more powerful to do it that way than to say, hey, you're an asshole. You're not teaming up with us. It's almost like, well, I might as well go with them, and then all of a sudden, like by proxy, they start to change as well, right?
Through osmosis.
Exactly. Yes.
The fear of missing out is so powerful.
Absolutely.
And your analogy there, your visual is so cool. You don't need to say you're the asshole because you're not involved in our team. It's indifference. It's passive support. Whatever you think is going to help you reach your highest goal, I support. Yeah. But I know what I have to do, and I know what the people that are on my inner circle team have to do. If you want to join, here's the parameters in place to do that.
Yes. So obviously putting down guidelines and having some kind of, I guess, rules is always important. From there, how do you kind of enforce those rules in a way that is constructive for that individual, but also preserves your own integrity in terms of what you want and where you want to go?
Spend a lot of time with yourself, with your eyes closed, sitting down, and just thinking about what's going on in life. That's one of my key strategies. Have a lot of mentors. So you always have to be, for me at least, always reporting to a diverse group of accountability partners, thought partners, mentors, advisors, because as you tell them what's going on, you refine that current narrative. They're going to point out holes in your thinking. They're going to point out areas where you're letting your ego take lead, and they're going to point out areas where it's like, this guy's been holding your team back for 6 months, but just because you guys are friends, you're keeping him on board, for example. So know your own mind and how your thoughts work, and then share a lot of that with people that are way smarter than you to keep you on your stated goals. And don't be afraid to change anything. Don't be afraid to change your own thoughts or to change your actions or the trajectory of the business, because at the end of the day, it really is about adaptability.
Many a time I've been commended for asking a good question. That was probably one of the best answers I've ever heard. So kudos to you there, Logan. I mean,
thanks.
That's a really good perspective to have, and a practice to have. Is that there is no answer. There's no one answer. You're gonna get you can follow through with it, and then you have to kind of assess the result. And like you said, have an adaptability. But if you're continually getting the same result, something's got to change. If your response to this individual has been, okay, it's your thing, okay, and you're not going in the direction that you want to, there has to be some kind of intervention there. And then from there, like you said, having mentors, having accountability partners is one of the most powerful things that people can have. But I think in some ways it makes it challenging nowadays because we are kind of doing our own thing most of the time. What are some ways that you kind of allow yourself to be in a position to have accountability partners, have mentors? How have you leveraged yourself thus far to do that?
I want to unbox that. But before we close up on the last topic, just to keep it a little less ambiguous and maybe distill it down to a step or two that's approachable.
I like it that way.
It's when your question really is, as a leader, manager, owner, whatever, entrepreneur, if you have that individual or you have a teammate who's just not on the program anymore. In my own personal experience, the way that things have kind of come to life is there's like an inner circle of operator level players who are tracking on everything from the top line of the business and opportunities all the way down to base logistics and office supplies, and deliverable services and how the value proposition works in real life. So there's a few key apex predators level, like A players at the top. That's like an organic space to be. It's very organic. It's very visceral and intuitive. You can slap any business card, any title, any paycheck, any contract on that, but at the end of the day, it's organic, man. It's the same thing as clearing a building. A dude could be called a breacher, but he may not actually be that. Like when you're going to roll into a building and kick down the door and do work on the inside, you're only going to do that with dudes that you know for a fact are going to do it right. Any of the dudes who are just not there heart and mind wise, any of the guys that are not organically, energetically there, they're left in the tent. They're left on the post to stand guard. So I take a similar approach and have for several years, that anyone that's at the pinnacle and they wake up every day and they're set on fire, they want to do the best work of their career. They wake up, they want to make up their current project a portfolio piece on their LinkedIn, on their resume. They want to be able to talk about what they're doing publicly, and as opposed to just showing up and getting a paycheck. Those individuals, they're always hungry. They're always running forward. And those are the people that you never really have to worry about the hard confrontations with. It's the other groups that it's like the other echelon and tier of employee, of team member, of people that's what you have. Great legal, great HR, great management, great community managers. You have great people with those skill sets. So I don't even really interact much on that capacity with that echelon of team member. I really interact with a very small bandwidth of people. It's other super aggressive, high performance operators who are basically my coaches. I see all the people I surround myself with as mentors, even colleagues and business partners, and then a lot of the advisors. So I think for a very distilled down step for any entrepreneur looking on how the hell do I motivate these guys to show up on time? You surround yourself with business owners and mentors that are way better than you are. And then you hire HR, legal, management to do it right. That's what today's society calls for. And don't get engaged in that space. That's my personal belief.
And I actually, as you're saying that and explaining that, obviously, I'm taking in these ideas, and like the idea of me being surrounded by very high level individuals actually makes me feel like insecure. It's like, oh shit, like what do I have to offer to that, right? Whereas I have comfortability when I go, it's easy for me to be in the other group, right? But like I also know that my growth occurs in the uncomfortability.
100%. It's easy to be an alpha when you're
surrounded by a bunch of beta fish.
and I hate to laugh at that because there's a space for everyone in life, and you know, achievement and trauma are all relative. So it's everyone has a unique path to walk, but it's a double-edged sword, man, because when you're in that uncomfortable space, when you're facing down a dude who's founded successful, profitable, high-level organizations, exited and sold multiple times, when you're talking with these serial entrepreneurs who have retired a dozen times over, you know, and that keeps you humble, it keeps you grateful, it keeps you hardworking and hungry. You know, if you stay in your own house all the time and you have everyone reminding you on how awesome things are that you did, that's where complacency steps in. You know, that's why you infill leadership to manage and keep the engine moving that you've already built and forge your discipline at higher levels.
Do you find that that's actually part of your business strategy in terms of, like, hey, after a certain amount of time, somebody else is going to be doing this because this will no longer cause me to grow?
Absolutely. But in addition to that, we've always said from day one during hiring interviews, we want people to grow from within. There's no such thing as a fixed designated position in our teams. I want people to take my job. As an entrepreneur, anyone who has that sort of experience knows that you have multiple jobs. Entrepreneurs wear tons of hats. So for me, I love the concept of someone taking over a CEO role at the highest level, or marketing lead, or, you know, the automation components of a business. I love the idea of a leader coming in who's highly proficient, passionate, and aligns with the purpose of our overall mission and can do better than work than I could ever do there. You know, a successful entrepreneur is someone who can develop a profitable business, but a great entrepreneur is someone who can exit the operations and it still grows better than it would have with them inside the company. So it's all about empowering people and allowing them to grow through the ranks and letting them know there's no such thing as a ceiling. There really isn't. And I'm certainly not going to get in anyone's way for career growth.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest obstacle for people is to accomplish that, in terms of the of that entrepreneurial spirit of, I'm going to build this, I'm going to empower people, and I'm moving on? What do you think the biggest obstacle is for people? Is it lack of resources? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it lack of self-awareness? Is it...
Well, if anyone thinks that they have a lack of resources or knowledge, that's a illusion, and that's perceived, and that's a smokescreen. And frankly, I would be as bold as to say that is self-deception, and it's a level of cognitive complacency. It's like a mental monster that's filled with, that's just a doubter. It's like a doubt machine. So if anyone thinks at this day and age genuinely that they have a lack of information availability, or even resources for that matter, for startup building, I would say check out Google. check out Google. I mean, the wealth of human knowledge over centuries is collected in real time online, and a lot of it is available for the public for no cost or free. So that's that. But honestly, aside from that aspect, the first thing that comes up for me when you're asking what is the primary holding factor for folks that are trying to scale a project, and it's really imagination, and that is rooted in meaning, and purpose. Just why keep going? You know, if once you reach a certain point where all of your needs are met and then some, why keep going? How many more haircuts can you possibly get? You know, how many more shoes can you buy? You know, even if you have multiple vehicles and you have all the luxuries and the opulence, why keep going? And that's you know, I love Simon Sinek because he always talked about the deep why. And if I am really taking the position of a hippie in this conversation and just keep pointing back to that self-reflection, which is you will be able to scale and bust through those barriers if you're always reminding yourself why you're trying to do this, what the larger meaning is. And that's always a societal contribution. I think the majority of entrepreneurs that get to a certain level are focused on self-realization and societal contribution, and that's their why.
I think that's an amazing segue for something that I would be remiss if we didn't speak about is your most recent societal contribution and what you've got in the works here at Trainerspace for those who are coming back from deployment. Can you share a little bit about what's going on as much as you can? I know some things are like NDAs all over the place, but can you give us a little bit of like a sneak preview of what you have, what your concept is, what your why is, and what you're actually practically doing here for the troops?
Trainerspace has a foothold as a veteran-owned and operated company, but we wanted to do more than that. We see ourselves as a community and a media group. We utilize a gym facility. We utilize amazing technologies that we can unpack a bit, but at our heart and soul, we are a community-driven organization. We want to foster moments of connectivity between people, because that really is so much of a solution to today's problems. That's why we created the Trainerspace Foundation. Our foundation is a nonprofit. It's a charity group. It is separate from our gym business, but complementary in a big way. It does a range of things. The entry level, we provide no-cost memberships to our facility to qualified military veterans, which basically looks like honorable discharge. So you have an honorable discharge, and you're in the area, and you want to get into the best shape of your life, we've got your back, as well as your spouse. So that's our initial gift at the entry level, and of course we rise through the performance tiers. And support tiers from there. We're ramping up our program called Veteran 2.0, which allows us to not only get veterans in the best shape of their lives through personal training services, physical therapy, nutritional counseling with health coaches, but also a range of performance and detox technologies, everything from intravenous therapy, flotation tanks, cryotherapy, and most recently, photobiomodulation or red light therapy. So we do things in that space as well to detox and prime these individuals for the best work of their entire life.
Listening to that, how important is a person's well-being contingent upon, or how important is their overall physical health contingent upon their wellness and their performance in everyday life? Like you said,
Sure.
You've done your time in the military, and now you're kind of transitioning from civilian life. In general, are veterans not considering this? Is this something that's already happening? I mean, like, what does that transition process look like? Do you think obviously, if you're going through this, there has to be some kind of value here or something that's not being done already, correct?
There's so many incredible organizations in the veteran space that do great work in the holistic fields of holistic medical fields. A lot of groups are focused on empowerment and helping to forge America's next greatest generation. I genuinely feel like the Trainerspace Foundation is privileged to be among those great leaders and those great organizations. We could name them, but at the end of the day, well-being is vital for longevity. Sustained effort is the name of the civilian game. So, you'll see plenty of case studies of where people force their will upon a project at the cost of their health, at the cost of the relationships, at the cost of well-being, and they will be successful by many factors. So it's difficult to really say that well-being is the most important factor for success, because you can achieve a lot being fat and sick, and just putting it in simple terms. However, that a lot of times it's a short-term trade-off. I fundamentally believe that placing an emphasis on well-being and being present in your life being grateful and for what you have, and taking things more of a slow and steady approach, consistent action, like a marathon. Every day you're doing stuff, as opposed to big sprints and then large levels of you know, inactivity. I think that's probably the best way to go about doing it. So well-being is vital to success as an entrepreneur, in my opinion.
And I think that's probably a perfect place to wrap this thing up. Before we go, though, Logan, can you let us know how we can get a hold of you, how we can kind of learn more about you?
Absolutely. So I'm really easy to get a hold of. I'm active on social media, so go ahead and check out Logan Skees on Instagram, LinkedIn.
And I'll be putting that into the description and in the YouTube link as well.
I also hang out at Trainerspace a lot, so if anyone's coming down to South Florida or they're local to the area and they want to see what we've done here at the facility, it speaks for itself. So I'd love to connect with them in person. They could definitely call the front desk or get a hold of me through there.
And I will attest that this is. I told Logan, I'm like, yo, this would be the place that I would create if like Scrooge McDuck said like build a gym. So like you know, he and I have sweat a few times together in some workouts, and this place is you got to stop in. It's something to behold. So Logan, I really appreciate your time today, and we definitely got to sit down again and wrap.
You,
and good luck to everything here at
Thank you, brother.
Trainerspace and everything
Appreciate
with you,
that.
man. Thanks for sitting down.
Absolutely.
Awesome.